So this isn't even that big of one. So we built a 10-foot tall chamber to measure these. They're actually pretty much giant straws, and so if you think about putting a bunch of straws in the ground, then you can imagine that the gas exchange between what's in the ground and what's in the atmosphere is really quite rapid. And these things do amazing gas exchange.
This is Phragmites. It's a tall grass that has grown in the salt marshes of North America for thousands of years. A little more than 100 years ago, a different strain of Phragmites was introduced to the salt marshes of North America from Europe. This invasive strain can outcompete the native salt marsh grasses, and over the last 100 years it has spread across the salt marshes of North America. The consequence of this unintended introduction is that Phragmites now cover more of the North American salt marshes than 100 years ago.
It's called a cryptic invasion because just looking at it, it's really hard to tell.
Is the spread of Phragmites a bad thing? Can a grass be good or evil? Dr. Wally Fullweiler is a professor at Boston University who studies the salt marshes that Phragmites has taken over. Through her research, she can answer questions about Phragmites in an unbiased way.
Salt marshes we care about for a variety of reasons because they're very important for different animals and different birds, and they provide critical habitat for them, and they provide critical nursery grounds. And then salt marshes also provide these ecosystem services that are kind of harder to see and quantify. They act as a nice big buffer. So when, let's say, like Hurricane Sandy or something comes in, salt marshes can actually slow down the big wall of water that would come with it. You can think of them like a giant sponge. They also are really important for sequestering carbon because their area that they make up is pretty small, but the amount of carbon that they have in them is really large, and so it's kind of like a hot spot of carbon sequestration.
Salt marshes can be a natural source of greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide, nitrous oxide, and methane.
This research is trying to understand how human actions have directly changed how these salt marshes function. And the function that we're looking at is their ability to sequester carbon and deal with these greenhouse gases.
Dr. Fullweiler wants to understand how the spread of Phragmites has influenced the emission of greenhouse gases from salt marshes.
We were all prepared to say that Phragmites, because it's an invasive species, is bad, and it's going to do terrible things to the marsh.
And this was a reasonable assumption to have before conducting the research. Remember, Phragmites are basically giant straws, so they connect the processes in the soil that form greenhouse gases directly to the atmosphere. Dr. Fullweiler and her team of students conduct their research out in the salt marshes where different types of grasses are growing. This is Holly Emery, a graduate student working with Dr. Fullweiler.
Holly, what are you doing?
Taking my last core of my master's.
Phragmites is the invasive grass and Spartina is the native grass. These grasses form a thick matrix of roots beneath the marsh sediment. Bacterial communities naturally live within these sediments, but also in association with the roots. And it is the activity of the bacteria that influences the production of greenhouse gases.
So if we go out there to measure these greenhouse gases and we go and say, okay, well, how am I going to do that? Well, I'll put a chamber over an unvegetated area, and that will just capture the sediment in the microbial community. And then we can put a chamber over the Phragmites, right? And then we can put a chamber over the Spartina. And over time, what we do is we extract a gas sample out of here, and we can measure it downstairs. And from this relationship, from taking concentrations of gas out of this chamber over different times, you get sort of this nice linear relationship, and the slope will tell you the flux of gas that's coming out of here.
So does Phragmites emit more greenhouse gases like methane and carbon dioxide?
I can't actually say that because they you can see that they have really thick woody biomass. You know, they're for a grass, right? They're pretty thick, and I don't know. That doesn't sound like a grass, right? That's pretty. They're quite robust, and they're actually great at sequestering carbon. So when they photosynthesize, they draw down a ton of carbon dioxide, and they hold it. And then with the methane, it looks like they also actually release less methane overall than the Spartina does, and the Spartina is the natural grass that's in the salt marsh. So it kind of goes to show you that we can't just have a blanket policy like, all things that are invasive are bad, and this can be bad in other ways. It can decrease biodiversity. It can knock out the natural system. So I don't think we should go planting Phragmites everywhere. But I do think sometimes we have to take a nuanced view on these things. And at least in terms of carbon sequestration, it looks like Phragmites is actually good at that. Maybe they're not totally evil, right? Maybe they're not totally evil.
Dr. Fullweiler didn't find the answer she was expecting, and that is the exciting part about scientific research. We can learn new and unexpected things.
People should go out to their salt marshes, right? Because they're beautiful and there are all these birds out there. And so you don't have to appreciate nitrogen or methane or anything like that. You can just go out there and see how beautiful they are. And then just know in the back of your head that not only are they really nice to walk around in, but they're actually doing all of these other ecosystem services for you.